Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode as well as free training on creativity over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's James Taylor here. Today's episode was first aired as part of International Authors Summit. This inspiring virtual summit reveals the secrets of making, marketing, and monetizing a best-selling book. If you would like to access the full video version as well as in-depth sessions with over 40 best-selling authors, then I've got a very special offer for you. Just go to internationalauthorssummit.com where you'll be able to register for a free pass for the summit. Yeah, that's right. Over 40 New York Times and Amazon best-selling authors, book editors, agents, and publishers sharing their insights, strategies, and tactics on how to write and market your first or next bestseller. So just go to internationalauthorssummit.com, but not before you listen to today's episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Cathy Fyock. Cathy is the Business Book Strategist and works with thought leaders and professionals who want to write as a business or career development strategy. She is the author of 8 books, including On Your Mark, From First Word to First Draft in 6 weeks, and Blog to Book. Since beginning her business in 2014, she has helped 130 plus professionals become published authors. And it's my great pleasure to have Cathy join us today. So welcome, Cathy.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So it's lovely seeing you again. We met up at the National Speakers Association winter conference recently as well. It was lovely seeing you. And I know you got a chance on, I think it was on the Sunday, to go up on stage and give a presentation. And I felt really sorry for her because you had the hardest gig of the entire conference. So everyone else was getting like maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and yourself, and I know Deborah Gardner, like a number of us got 5 minutes to do your thing. So what was that like?
Yes, I know, it's crazy. That was crazy. I have never prepared so much for so little time on stage. But it was really a great experience. It really causes you to hone your message so crisp and so sharp. So it was a lot of preparation, but it was a lot of fun.
And you also, I think the slides were going through automatically as well, so you had to really stay on track the whole time.
You had to. So it was very challenging, and to talk for just 5 minutes and to make an impact. And the whole thing too, I wanted to make a point of it's important to give your audience members space to hear and process. So I also wanted to work in points of sort of silence and letting the audience process. So that was very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Well, just really staying busy. There are lots and lots of speakers who want to become authors or who know they need a new book to position their thought leadership, to stay relevant, to stay current, to stay in the spotlight.
So I guess I was talking to a speaker the other day, and she is repositioning. She's a successful speaker, but she's now speaking about a very different thing and kind of repositioning her brand as well. And she was talking about it. She was saying, I'm now kind of starting to think about writing the book because it's such a big change for her. I need to be positioning myself in a book as a really good way of doing that.
Well, exactly. And that's exactly what I did when I was a human resources professional and consultant and expert, and wanted to reposition myself as a book coach. So I needed to write the book about how to do that. And that was able to position me or reposition me in this whole new space. And that's the power of a book. And that's really, I tell a lot of my authors that I work with, that's the power of a book, is it allows you to go from here to there seamlessly because you've written the book on it.
Now, today, do maybe speakers that are watching this just now that are just coming into the world of speaking, do you still need to have a book? I mean, we think of this word author, authority, being an authority on something. Is it still required that you have a book today in the speaking world?
Yes. I continue to hear many of the authors come to me and they say, I want to get that keynote role, and I can't become a keynoter unless I'm an author. So it's imperative. It's imperative that you have the book. Plus, if you somehow have made it onto the keynote stage and you don't have a book, you're leaving money on the table. And so a book is a way to gain additional revenue, and then many times you can double your fees, triple your fees, because you are now the author.
Now, I'm going to use myself as a little bit of the guinea pig for this as well. I am one of those speakers who has been speaking for a little while, not too long, but I know that I need to write a book. And I know, and all my friends, successful speakers, have all said, when are you going to write that book? And I feel so bad about it because they keep, in fact, Scott McCain, who I interviewed recently, Speaker Hall of Fame inductee, incredible speaker. I said to him, what was the one thing you wish you had done? He said, I wish I'd written a book earlier. That was his, in terms of building his kind of thought leadership. So for anyone that's watching this, maybe like myself, who is getting started speaking but doesn't have a book, can you maybe talk about, how do we even start thinking? Because it feels like it's a big undertaking, writing a book. It feels like a very solid, kind of heavy thing to do.
And it is. And I can't believe you've escaped a conversation with me about writing your book, James. We're going to have another sidebar conversation about just that. But yeah, it's incredibly important to have that book. And yes, it is a huge undertaking. And I think what makes it so hard is that a book will always be important, but it will never be urgent. So it's always going to be important, but never urgent. And that's why I think we sometimes don't write it as soon as we should, or when it's really the right time to get that book out there. It's never urgent, but always important. And we tend to work our to-do list by what is urgent and not what's important. So that's why I suggest to everyone working on a book that you schedule time on your calendar. It doesn't go on your to-do list. It goes on your calendar.
So I heard one of the other guests I had recently, he'd spoken to Zig Ziglar, the great Zig Ziglar, when Zig was live, and said to him, so you're an author? And he said, well, no, I'm not an author. And the person kind of stood back a little bit. What do you mean? I've got your books at home. I've read all your books. He said, no. I write 3 pages a day, and at the end of it, at some point, someone says you've got a book there, and then that's what we publish. So he was very much like every day he'd be writing every day, but he didn't think about it so much as writing necessarily a book. He was writing. He was getting to that daily practice of writing every day. For someone that is maybe wanting to start developing their chops as a writer and kind of developing that skill, because it is a skill, what's the best way to start unlocking that part of themselves?
Well, I think the whole concept of blog to book is an easy, fast, and almost painless way to create a book. That's the topic of my last book, because at an NSA meeting, I had, within the course of about 24 hours, 4 people come up to me at a convention and say, Cathy, I've been blogging for 4 years, 10 years, longer. I have all this great content. I feel like I have enough content for a book. How can I make that happen? And it's absolutely doable, whether you're going to start writing now and at the end of the year have a book, or you've been blogging, you can repurpose that writing for your next book.
And I guess you could also do that if you're more of a vlogger, if you're more a YouTube type person. I mean, I use... My process is kind of strange for doing my blog, which is really a vlog. I write it first, and then I speak it often to auto cue, and then it gets taken away. So I actually have the written words there, but it ends up being the video tends to be the key thing. So I could take that video and that transcript there, and then start reworking that into a book. But I'm thinking, I'm not the most patient of people. Is it better to work with find an editor or a co-writer to help you on that process?
I don't think so. If you're a speaker, you want to really own your thought leadership. You want to own your intellectual property. So I think it's really important as a speaker, and maybe other folks, maybe it's not as important, but I think as a speaker, you will get deep knowledge around your area of expertise that will make you a better speaker for having done the book. But once you have this content, what you need to do is just create a strategic plan for that book that is aligned with your business strategy. And you basically say, okay, here is my concept for this book. This is what I've been writing about or speaking about or vlogging about. And what you do is you create your outline, you see where you already have content pieces, and then you just simply write and fill in the gap. You still want to have some important content that you haven't developed yet.
So I was talking to someone the other day, and they had just attended an event by Brian Tracy, and Brian had mentioned that he writes a book, or he publishes a book every 3 months now, because he said the publishers, that their attention span is so short. You said you have to continually keep publishing in order to stay top of mind. So I'm guessing for some people that are really, really prolific in terms of publishing, they can also perhaps find co-writers and other people to maybe, let's say if someone was an expert on one particular topic, they could perhaps even find other experts on that topic and co-write a book together.
Absolutely. So that's possible. In fact, with a book, what's kind of exciting, I was telling an author this the other day, it's sort of like having a blank canvas and you are the artist. So sometimes authors say to me, well, what goes in the book? Well, I don't know. It's like an artist saying, well, what color should I use? What strokes should I use on the canvas? What picture do I want to paint? It's up to you. You're the creator of this book. So it can be anything that you want it to be.
Now, you mentioned that word a couple of times, thought leader. And we hear these different words like author, speaker, thought leader, expert, and they kind of get used interchangeably at different points as well. How would you define a thought leader? What makes a thought leader? And then we can maybe kind of get into like what it takes to actually become a thought leader.
I believe a thought leader is that individual who is leading the charge in some new area. Now, it could be an area that's been explored, like leadership, but it's exploring it in a new way. It's putting on a new lens, a new perspective. Perhaps it's using a different metaphor, a different analogy. It's using your own spin on that topic. So it's going where no one has gone before in a unique and individual sort of way.
That brings up a point though. I'm looking at my library of books, and I think, let's say on a particular topic, and I think it feels like every book has been written on that topic. Where can I fit into that topic? It seems people have written it better, more concise, or more expansive than I could ever do. Is that a common thing you find with some of your clients, that they just feel overwhelmed because it feels like someone's already done it maybe better than them?
Absolutely. So I say to them, though, in response, let's take leadership. Have we solved all the leadership issues in the world today? I hardly think so.
No, unfortunately not.
No. So we're always looking for a different way to approach that topic. It's still important. We haven't gotten all the answers. No one has sort of codified that in a way that really makes sense for everybody. So perhaps your view of leadership is that new slice, is that new way of looking at it that's going to make sense, maybe not to everybody, but it makes sense to somebody or to a certain industry or niche. So that's what I tell my authors is you definitely have a story to tell, but it's figuring out where you have your area of expertise and then how can you present that in a way that is unique and solves a problem that your client or your reader has.
As someone kind of starts writing this book, putting it together, and I know there's multiple stages, and we probably don't have time in this conversation to go through all the different stages that the book usually has to kind of go through, but it feels like a lot of time authors I've spoken to, especially first-time authors, they get to the end of having the book ready and they're so exhausted from the process of actually writing and getting editing and everything in the book that they then fall flat on the marketing part. And so when someone's kind of going into it, you mentioned strategy just earlier on, when someone's thinking about the strategy, just taking that step back and thinking about the totality of what this book means for them and their career and for the readers and the people they're looking to serve in that way, how should you be thinking about the marketing piece?
Well, definitely you need to start thinking about marketing when you start writing the book, or even ideally before you start writing the book. And part of that is about building your tribe. Who are the individuals that find your work really intriguing, really interesting, really right on, spot on, and then writing blogs and articles and other pieces of writing that will create that energy around your topic and that connection. So, and here's the thing that a lot of authors think is they have to write new content. Say the book is done and now they need to think about blogging and getting articles out there. I'm all about repurposing. So what pieces of the book can you extract as excerpted pieces or as pieces that are perhaps of interest because of something that's happening in the news, or it's a seasonal issue, or it's that time of year. So thinking about repurposing writing, either excerpting it in chunks or repurposing writing and getting it out there. It doesn't mean new work. It just means thinking more, being smarter and not necessarily working harder.
I guess you could also do some newsjacking there. If you see a news piece, something happening in the news, and if it relates to your topic, and you have a chapter where you kind of it relates to that, you can repurpose some of that content. Push it out there, start talking to some journalists, and try and get it featured.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's being aware of what is in the news, what are the trends, what are the issues, and then always be looking at your topic and saying, how does my topic connect to that topic, and how can I write a little blog piece that does link to that, because that will keep my topic fresh and relevant.
Now, one of the books I bought recently was by, I think you were involved in behind the scenes on this book as well, was Lois Creamer. Yeah, and it was I think it was Book More Business, I think was the name of the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a great book. Really, I advise it for speakers. It's a fantastic book on marketing and building your speaking. Now, talk me through a process like that, because there's someone, you could argue that's a very narrow type of audience you wrote that book for. So that was, it's aimed at speakers, and it's really aimed at people that want to speak professionally, as opposed to those who want to just speak because they have a message and they're not bothered about being paid for it as well. So I'd be fascinated, an author like that, with the kind of process that you kind of go through in identifying that tribe and thinking about that tribe and how that relates to the book that ends up being published.
Well, it's interesting. Lois was actually one of those 4 people who came up to me at the conference who said, I've been blogging for 4 years or 10 years. I don't even know how long it was. And she said, I know I have enough content for a book. I need a book, but I don't know how to get there. And can you help me? And that's where I thought, oh, yes, I can help you. And I should write a book about how to do that. So I helped Lois, though, on her book. And she did have wonderful content. She wanted to just really add a couple of pieces. So it was a process of going through, seeing what she had, creating an outline, seeing what pieces were missing, having her write those specific chunks of narrative, and then looking for a way to organize the material so that it made sense. And what we did was looking at sort of the different phases of becoming a speaker, and sort of what is the branding and the issues up front about who you are and what your message is and who you're for, and then how to make the sales call, how to target the right audiences, and sort of that sequence of going through. So we organized the book's content that way, and then just organized her blog posts accordingly. We also needed to take out some redundancies there, because in a blog you can repeat that same message, something that you really feel strongly about. And, if you have something out there in January, you can have that same message or a version of it in July or August. But in a book, it's just too much. It's redundant. So we had to edit out some content and then make sure it was evergreen. What I found in almost every author's blog content is there's a sense of immediacy in blog content. I saw this yesterday, or this happened to me this week, and so I'm going to reflect on that. So we have to make those pieces evergreen so that it has that evergreen feel, because we want a book's content to be relevant for 5 or more years.
And what about those many speakers? our kind of stock in trade as stories. We trade and we use stories. That's one of the things we do when we're up on stage. Whereas maybe like trainers, they're much better at tend to using more processes, action. Do this, then this as well. And I'm thinking about someone like I was thinking about Neen James, great speaker, and she talks a lot about conceptual models, using visual representations of what you're trying to get. So if someone's just been writing blog posts, but maybe haven't. And they haven't necessarily been showing the ABCs of something. They may be telling a story, or maybe they're up on stage telling a story. How do you then take that information and then wrap around it stuff that people can actually remember? Those, the Stephen Coveys, the grids, and all the things that we actually remember. Because like a lot of these books, I remember my retention is probably this much, but I do remember graphics and I remember conceptual models. So do you work with authors on that as well?
Absolutely. For example, I worked with an author who had an amazing story. He went from couch potato, he lost 130 pounds and became an Iron Man. Wow. And so it's like his story of how he did that, which is a fabulous story. But when I was talking with Mark, I said, I think you want to do something more than just tell the story. I think you probably want to give some folks so what do we do? What are the steps? What is the process? So I had him think through what are the steps. And he goes, well, that's interesting. I've been sort of thinking about these 6 principles or pillars. And I said, great. So let's identify what those are, and then let's dissect your story and see if we can't insert that into these different pillars, if you will. And he was able then to create his book. He was able to create his keynote. And in fact, I just saw him give his keynote last week, and it was awesome.
Fantastic. And that reminds me a little bit. There's one of our other guests, Peter Cook, who's from Thought Leaders Business School, partnered with Matt Church, an amazing speaker from Australia. I remember them telling me that they do this thing called pink sheets. And I think Jane Anderson, one of our other guests, she's talked about these pink sheets, which is a one-pager. She said because a lot of the time, speakers, when they could have a number of years into their career, and then they actually look down and say, what intellectual property do you have? Or do you have to write a book now about, or you have to give a training, and like, I don't know, what do I have? I don't have anything. So one of the things that I remember they teach is having stories, is having like processes, it's having some kind of visual representation, maybe a mantra. Pagina Eshivaria, who we have as a guest on this, is great, like mantras, having mantras as well. So you've kind of got all these different things in place, and then they were saying that it's then easy. You can, if you're continually adding to this, in their case they call them pink sheets, but if you have some form of continually adding to these things, that could be a chapter in a book, that could be 10 minutes in a talk, that could be a 3-hour part of a workshop. But unless you write it down and have it in some kind of written form, then it's just going to go in ether. Exactly.
So stories are wonderful, and that's what people remember. But in order to organize your book, you probably need to think about, well, what are the 3 lessons, or what are the morals of the story, or what are the steps that get you to the other side of the pain or the problem that you're having. So that's what I typically do. Will help folks understand what those keys are, because that is really the heart of what it is to be a thought leader, is to have it boiled down from this wonderful story with a great message that's very inspirational to, okay, so how can I apply that? So it's those steps, the process, the model that is what creates a thought leader.
So let's go to some quick fire questions for you just now, Cathy. Let's talk about what tools do you use, as an author, as a writer. What is that software that you use to do your writing, or is there any particular online tool or resource you find very useful for yourself as an author and also as a speaker?
Many of my clients and I use Word. I mean, pretty basic. And what I like about Word is that we don't have to learn it. Some of the other software that's out there is great, and I've heard wonderful things about Scrivener and some other apps. But here's the thing. We know Word. And what I found with a lot of authors, it's, oh, I think I'm going to buy this new whatever, and I'm going to need to learn that. So it becomes productive procrastination. In other words, putting off what you should really do. It's like, oh, I can justify it because I'm doing something, I'm learning something, but I'm really putting off what's most important, which is writing my book. So I say stick with what you know. I think Word is very functional. And especially if you have this sense of, I need to get my book done, do it in Word.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's some writers who will do that first draft, just kind of getting it out of their head by just writing it on the page, and then they will then go and put it onto a document for editing. I'm remembering the children's author Roald Dahl, who I was big fan of, and Roald Dahl always sharpened 6 pencils, HB pencils, before he would went into write, and he knew he'd done a day's writing when those 8 pencils were blunt. That was his day. That was his day's writing. It was a very easy way of having to count words. Like when they're blunt, that's me. I can go and have my lunch. What about when it comes to a book? Because you're an author, but is there a particular book you think, especially for speakers, is very useful for them to read?
Well, I love Stephen King's On Writing. I think it's one of the best, and what it does is let you know that while writing may be hard for you, it's hard really for everybody. And it takes a certain amount of discipline to get it done. And so that to me is reassuring to know that even the best writers, even the most prolific writers, have a process and have a discipline about their work.
And what about in your speaker bag? What is in that bag that you carry with you to all of your speaking engagements? You never leave the home or the office without. What's in that bag?
Well, usually I carry my books with me because I think an author should always carry their book. I have at least one copy, and I also wear my button, which is "Ask Me About My Book," and I wear this to all engagements because inevitably, if I wear that on the plane, I'm selling a book on the plane, or because somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, tell me about your book," and I've also got new stickers that I put on the back of my phone. So yeah, so I really, really love that. So, but definitely carry your books with you as a speaker and an author. Always have your books with you.
There's definitely something you feel there when you meet a speaker and they give you that book, and instantly there's an authority that comes with that. And I know they talk about the book as a business card, and that's been overused as a phrase. And obviously you don't want to write a bad book. You want to write a good book that you're proud of as well. But having that book that you're proud of, you're happy to give over, it just feels. And I think the one I saw recently, I'm a huge fan of how he did it, was Phil M. Jones, who had that book, and it was not a big book. It's, I don't know, 80 something pages or something. Yeah, so they just
always have your book with you.
Have it with you.
And give it away. I think giving away your book is maybe one of the best strategies too, because it creates new fans, it builds your tribe, and it is a great calling card. Yeah. People will not throw a book away. They may or may not read it, but the impact of having a book, and they may give it to someone else, and they may read it. And so lots of good things can come from that.
So Cathy, I want you to imagine tomorrow morning you wake up and you have to start from scratch. So you have all the skills you've acquired as an author and as a speaker, but no one knows you, you know no one. What would you do? How would you restart things?
I'd write a book. Which is really how I reinvented myself, because I was a human resources consultant in my former life. And one day I decided I needed to reinvent myself. So I put the business plan together and I wrote the book about how to write the book. So I think anytime someone is thinking, okay, so now what's next? If you see the path that you want to go and you have some expertise there, then perhaps the strategy is to write the book, because it's a great way of establishing your credibility, your visibility, to expand your impact, and get some media coverage too. So it's all good stuff.
Cathy, if people want to reach out to you, maybe learn more about your services, your speaking, and the other things that you have going on, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
It's CathyFyock.com. That's it. CathyFyock. Fyock.
Well, Cathy, it's a pleasure speaking to you as always. I love when we get a chance to meet up and chat as well. Thanks so much for coming on today, and I wish you all the best with your next book as well.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.